Inácio Lula da Silva has defended the trial that sent former President Jair Bolsonaro to more than 27 years in prison for plotting a coup. Lula had called the verdict historic and rejected Donald Trump's claim that it was a witch hunt. He said the trial safeguards Brazil's institutions and democratic rule of law. Lula also criticized Trump's 50% tariff on Brazilian imports, calling it misguided and illogical. He insisted Brazil is open to negotiations while maintaining its democracy and sovereignty. Sharad Kohli, economist, is live with us on this story. Sharad, what do you make of this latest statement by the Brazilian president on the verdict that has sent Bolsonaro to jail?
Well, I think Bolsonaro was always a darling of America, and he fitted the ideology which President Trump follows right now. So it suited him, and the moment there was a change, and when President Lula came in, I mean, there were cases which are opened, and he's been sentenced to several years in jail. And obviously, America is upset about this, that their close ally, their friend, is now going to be in jail. In fact, a lot of circles say that one of the prime reasons for tariffs on Brazil has been President Bolsonaro's imprisonment and now jail, the action being taken on him. Well, President Trump doesn't want him to do that. Well, we should not forget, and I think that America does a very large trade with Brazil. In fact, the total trade amount is about $94 billion, and there are very substantial items and very important items being imported by America at this point of time, which include minerals and fuels. There's iron and steel. There's coffee. There's a lot of things coming from Brazil. So President Trump, by levying 50% tariff, we should not forget that along with India, Brazil is the other country which has been slapped with 50% tariffs. And I think tariffs are being used as a weapon, whereas the case in India, he said that probably India is, importing Russian oil. And of course, there were other issues, but then the additional tariffs were levied because of the import of Russian oil. Whereas for Brazil, I think it's former President Bolsonaro seems to be the reason. So he's trying to weaponize, tariffs for anything and everything. He's seen probably tariff is the solution, but the law is taking its own course as far as Brazil is concerned. I think the Brazilian Supreme Court has ruled, that imprisonment for President Bolsonaro, and he will have to go through it. Meanwhile, President Lula, is a great friend. President Lula is a very active member of BRICS also. He's been supporting. He wants to come together with India, Russia, China, and in this whole trade war against America. So I think this is going to be a very interesting case going forward, because the Brazilian Supreme Court, whether it gets dominated by America, whether President Trump interferes, or shall I say Trump administration interferes in the judiciary of Brazil, and it interferes in the political circles of Brazil, I think will have to be seen in the days to come, Uday.
Right. Also, Sharad, as far as, of course, these tariffs are concerned, do you believe then perhaps they are a direct reason of the Bolsonaro trial? Of course, we are seeing how Lula has said that he's open for negotiations. He's once again said that it's unfair. Do you believe that these statements by Lula will have any effect on the U.S. relooking at these 50% tariffs on Brazil?
Well, I think the condition for negotiation would be a release of and taking back the cases against former President Bolsonaro, which I really don't think President Lula is going to agree, because he would say that the law is taking its own course. It's the Supreme Court of Brazil which is calling shots. It's not the politics which is calling shots. It's the former deeds of President Bolsonaro which has led him into this situation. So whereas you see a starking difference between the negotiations with India, whereas for India, it wants us to stop, importing Russian oil. Whereas for Brazil, it wants President Bolsonaro to be a free man. He wants President Bolsonaro to be reinstated as president, left to Donald Trump administration. They would want Bolsonaro to be back in the fray. Whereas President Lula has been elected and lawfully elected, democratically elected. And I really don't think, something is going to come out. President Lula has obviously at diplomatic level, you have to show your willingness to negotiate. Because if President Trump agrees to anything short of, not releasing President Bolsonaro or dropping the cases against President Bolsonaro, President Lula would be open. But if it comes down to letting off criminal charges, dropping the criminal charges, I really don't think President Lula would have any say as far as the Supreme Court is concerned. Well, another set of circles say that the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court of Brazil, has been not been one of the favorites of Americans. So there's a lot of things moving around. I think we'll have to wait and see as to how these negotiations shape up, Uday. I really don't think President Trump is going to really yield unless cases are dropped against President Bolsonaro.
All right. Appreciate you joining.